Well, how do you want to start with...
When did you first come to the Lardeau Valley?
Well, I wasn't exactly in the Lardeau Valley when... that's not on now. He used to take a train up there and that. And the mill was running, and they were shipping poles because there were 4 or 5 little pole camps along there.
Was that Maitland Harrison, or?
Well, Maitland, he never raised any hell. I wouldn't want him to hear that, but he was better at fishing and playing golf and tennis and drinking tea.
Well, who had the big pole operation in those days?
Oh, there was no big one. But there was times that they took out quite a number, and Lindsay Brothers, I remember them taking out a big bunch of poles. This was just after the First World War, and that was a big time of poles. And they had a pole yard here in town, and they also did on their lakes at McCusp, and they had a pole yard down there at Wesley on their lakes there, just above the Higher Dam. I worked there too. But Newcomen had a couple of little camps down there, and Maitland, he had a little camp, and Jack Rady, he used to take out stuff too. But them guys are all
Did the boat go into Argenta as well?
Oh, well, they used to pull over there, yeah. They used to come over there.
Was the Great Northern running in those days too?
No, the Great Northern never did run.
Did they have boats on the lake?
Oh yeah, they had boats on the lake. They had 4 or 5 boats. They had the International and the Caslow and the Spokane and the State of Idaho, and I don't know, maybe they had more than that. I forget now. But they ran boats as far as Healy's Landing in the high water. I guess you knew that. But that kept the channel open, you see. But these stern wheelers, they turned it because the bars move all the time. I run a boat on there one time. I've run a boat right from Healy's Landing right down to the Kootenay.
How big a boat? How big?
Oh, a riverboat.
Sternwheeler?
No, a riverboat. A bateau like. The upper part I had a 18-foot Peterborough freighter, and I used it as a canoe. And then on the lower end it was a different job, of course, but I was coming clean through, all the way through the Clipper Rapids. Then when the water was over, the white water was that high, you know. We were on a river drive, you see.
Did you use boats on the river drives?
Yeah, you had to.
You also would walk on the logs as well, wouldn't you?
Well, but you have to rear them off because they get hung up on the shore. And you see, these logs have been put in the high water, and they had beached up on top, and the water had dropped. You had to roll them in. This was in the summertime. And some of them got off into the woods. You couldn't get them. But we was trying to salvage what they could so that the fellows wouldn't go broke, you see. But you had to have a boat to cross back and forth. Yeah, you couldn't. Then the centers of the logs logged up in the center. You can't wader. No. And you think you only got 2 or 3 logs sticking out of the water, and they move one, take a peep in and twist them around. Well, the first thing you know, they just boil up out of the bottom. You've seen a log drive, did you? Where at?
Log jams? Oh, they're
I mean log drive.
Oh no,
No.
They've stopped long ago.
No.
I've never seen one.
No.
How many men would work on it?
Oh, it depends on how big it is, you know. I was over on the Air Lakes one time, and they had to drive there. Must have been 30 men on it. They used to drive on the Slocan. They used to drive on the Kettle River. That was the way they did it those days.
Did they drive on the Lardeau as well as the Duncan?
Oh, yeah. They didn't come just from about the Duncan. You see, they didn't log up there. They drove on the upper Duncan down to the lake and then towed across when McGinnis was in there. That was, oh, geez, I don't know when that was anymore, but it was since the war, and he went broke on it. But that wasn't a big drive, you know. Those were only 2 or 3 men would be kind of herding down a few logs, you know. But those big drives like they had on the Slocan, maybe they'd have 15 million feet. Down on the Kettle, I worked on the Kettle one year, not driving, but I worked there one winter on a landing, and they put in 15 million feet. That was for Force Mills. That was 1920, I guess around 21 or 2, somewhere along in there. The last year they operated at Billings. But that was a regular drive. They would hire all the jacks they could. And they used boats. And there's quite a lot of guys on there. And there's quite a lot of wading and sacking and rearing.
What was your next job after you worked on the boat?
I had a million jobs. No, I was up there with the fisheries at one time.
Where, at Gerrard?
Yeah, and at Meadow Creek. I was four seasons at Meadow Creek.
What were you doing?
Spawner fish, Kootenay. This is before they had a channel around. That was pretty near 30 years ago.
What would you do?
Oh, spawn the fish. Take the spawn from them and fertilize it, and it had to be transported down to Casville to the hatchery there. They had a hatchery there then. And they were taking these eggs and they were selling them to the states, to state of Idaho and state of Washington, Montana. I don't know if they all got them, but for 4 years they sold them 15 million eggs. So it takes 4 years to build a run. And I was 3 years up at Gerrard when the hatchery was there.
That was quite a big place, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, there were several hotels there and a sawmill and that in that day. And at one time there was 2 steamboats on the lake.
There were 2?
Yeah, there was, probably not at the same time, but there was the Victoria. She was a barge type on there. She hauled, she took the railroaders in, you see. It got in the 90s, you see. And they used to transport this sacked ore from Trout Lake and Ferguson, and they would put it on the boat and bring it down to Gerrard and load it on the train, and they would go down. But the CPR, along about the turn of the century or a little after, they had one they called the Procter. It was built here and railroaded up there. It was a screw boat. So same with the Victoria. But there's not many remember that. Even the Brandon kids that were raised there, they didn't even know that there was one on there, the Victoria, but they had seen the Procter. But she was a tug type. I suppose she was maybe 50 feet long or more than that, something like that. Anyway, they could rail her in there. Probably the cabins were knocked down and that, as long as they get the hull in there. But they took her out of there again. I haven't got a picture of that one, but I've seen pictures of it. And I worked there at that hatchery, spawning those big fish when they had the traps in there. And we used to take 1,000,000, 100,000, more than 1,000,000 sometimes, and they were divided. They come. Sometimes we took them there and eyed them and that up right at Gerrard and hatched them. But most of the time they took the eyed eggs out. You see, and then they distributed them between here and Cranbrook, and I don't know where all of them went, but they'd leave about 200,000 here. They never put them back in, and that's what's the matter with that run now. You see, they robbed it. There's no fish there now. Oh, maybe 200 or 300, but the time we were there, by God, there must have been 5,000. With a 100-foot net, you could catch over 100 fish with one sweep in a 90-degree circle, a quarter of a turn. People won't believe that. And
was the mill running then?
Huh?
Was the mill running then?
Oh no, the mill never run. There was a little mill in there after cutting white pond for the matchbox factory. A fellow named Sukharov had it, but that was only for a year or so. But that was only a small cut, and they piled it there, and when it was air dried, they shipped it into the matchbox factory, or probably over Power. I guess you heard of that. Yeah. But anyway, the big mill, it shut down. It was a double cut band, if I remember right. But there's no sign of it hardly there anymore. But they had company houses there, and you've seen them. I mean, they're all dilapidated, but they were back in there. And those were for the people that were employed there, the big shots. And the place where Mrs. Brandon lived across the bridge, that's where the superintendent lived, Old Crawford. Did you know that?
No.
No? That's burned down. That's gone, you know. It was just across on the bridge on the lower side. Well, they had a garden. That was a nice little house. But they robbed that thing that they hear them talk about. They shipped them down the state. I only think they shipped eggs down there once to Coeur d'Alene, put them in Coeur d'Alene Lake. But, you know, they make a big thing out of it, and a lot of people think they killed fish there, but they did kill some. They had a guy there, if a fish had struggled too much, they knock him in the head, and well, that fractured their skull. He took the eggs and threw them up. Well, he'd turn belly up. But we didn't. We didn't do that. I was working for Bud Thompson. Do you know Terry Thompson?
No.
He married somebody around, it used to be around Johnson's Landing, where the McNichols, around with the McNichols. His mother was a McNichol, I think. Do you know McNichols?
Yeah.
Jim and Larry?
Jim and Larry, yeah.
Yeah. I knew the old lady, I used to know Bruce too. Bruce was on that job, on spawning fish there at Meadowcreek one year. So was Larry. Yeah, that's where I first knew him. Oh, that's probably 25 years ago or more. 30 years maybe, I don't know.
That job only lasted a short time.
Well, about a month.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that's nothing. In those days, you didn't get unemployed insurance when a job was through. You rolled your blankets and you went looking for another job. Yeah. People got it easy now. They get unemployed insurance and you don't work. Yeah. Yeah, you got that. The fellow writes out a check and hand it to you. Well, this is the end of it. They'd go to the woods, and when they got their logs out, well, they just shut her down, and you jumped on the train or whatever it was and waited to get the hell out of there and went looking for another one. I never had a steady job. I worked twice, but I worked 18 months. I go back again when they were operating. I worked 7 seasons for the power company here as their scaler and looked after their logs, unloading logs, and did the boom work, sorted their logs, and went and looked out for what operations they had out. You know, there were small operations that, because they were buying logs from anybody that had it, and people clearing land would maybe get a carload or two of white pine, and they'd get so much on the landing or so much on the car or something, or in the woods, so much on the skids or something like that.
You went timber cruising?
No, I've been worked with cruisers, but with the forestry, but I never did. I was never a cruiser.
What was your job? Huh? What would you do? Pack?
No, I would be a chainman, a rodman. I worked for years with the H. Green Company, and well, as a rodman, I worked on every kind of a survey there was. But when you went out, when you come in, you got paid, and if you stayed out a couple of months, you got paid when you come in, and then when another job come up, you went to work again. But I was on the survey, that was my first survey up there I ever went on. It was a compass lines, you see, just to, they could block out this timber, you know. And we were in on Cooper Creek, we was in Rusty Creek and Rapid Creek, and we were on Cascade, and we were on to Tenderfoot, and we were on Hope Creek. Well, Hope Creek job was no trail, and there's a canyon. You walked right up the creek with a pack on your back. Yeah.
How large a crew would go in?
Oh, there'd be about 3, an axeman and a rodman and a compass man. And some of them, when we was in on Cooper Creek, that was a bigger job. They had a bigger crew. They had 1, 2, 3, I think it was 3, a cook and a compass man. And if I remember, there was 3 of us, rodman and a couple of axemen. And we just blazed about and posted the corners where we turned. you were jogging up the creek, you know. You'd go along a quarter mile, drop up a quarter, jog along the way to follow. We had north and south lines, you see, so you had to jog around it that way.
Do you remember seeing the old flume and dam
Where at?
At Cooper Creek, where they were mining for gold?
No, I don't know.
Right.
That was before me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I knew there was a little in there, up in the canyon there. And I never tried plastering, but I've seen fellows doing it. But at Poplar one time, they had a dredge there. There's a steam outfit with a donkey engine on it, and they used a sort of a scoop and a drag line on it. My stepfather was a steam engineer, but that was just a wildcat thing. You know, it was a New York outfit, and they just were mining the New Yorkers. That was an awful lot of that done in the early days, you know. But there is a little gold in there. And on that flat there around 28 Mile, it runs about 10 cents to the yard. Well, nobody would tackle that. But you find fellas poking along, crevicing every once in a while in the summer. Yeah, a fellow named Stead had that. He was a super on there. That was 1909. 1909. Yeah. But at that time there was two hotels running, the Palace Hotel and I don't know what they call the other one, but it was run by old Charlie Hanson and his wife. Yeah. And old Rob, he had, Johnson had the hotel at that time, and later on old man Rob had it. He had a little store there. And Sandy Nason, he used to live there at Poplar. He was the lookout man on Lavina.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy that shot himself. Did you know that? No. The last two residents of Poplar Creek, they shot themselves, both of them. I guess that maybe they were making too much moonshine or something. I don't know. But Rod McRae, he was a game department guy, and he lived in that nice little cabin there. You see that little cabin there?
Well, I know what you can see from the road.
Yeah, that one right by the road there. Nice little cabin. That was brand new then. He was living in it, and Sandy lived in the next place up there, and my God, they both shot themselves. Yeah. Oh, there were several of them did that in the Lardeau years ago. I don't know why. One guy shot himself down there in the schoolhouse at Lardeau one time. But that was a long time ago. I guess that was might have been right after the First War, something like that. Old Simpson, he was an old timer over there at Howser. He had a store there. You heard of him? Yeah. And old Earl Stevens, he trapped up the Duncan, and old Dutch John Noyle, he trapped up there. They were the older guys up in there. Then later on, the Hinkses come in, and they had a place on the flat there, across on the east side from Howser, and there was Bertie Board and Tim Ainsworth lived over there. He trapped. You heard of him, I guess.
A little bit, yeah.
He trapped on Big Glacier Creek. He was a nice old fellow. They were Englishmen, of course. And I can remember being over there one time, and he had two big Llewellyn setters. And they had a chair at the table, and they sat down at the table with him. That's right. And when he died, he willed them to Maitland Harrison, but I guess he destroyed them, and must have, because I've never seen him again. He willed the trap line to Maitland, too.
Glacier Creek? Glacier?
Yeah. And then Ted Hunter, he was an old game department guy. He was retired. He lived there at Howser. I guess you know where he lived.
No.
And you know where Ernie Sedrud lives?
Lives now.
Yeah, up there by Howser. Yeah, well, he was the next place up the river. That nice house with a nice picture window in the front.
Yeah, I don't remember which one it is.
No, that's the next house. Yeah, but of course he died last fall. Oh, last summer. Sometime along about that, yeah. Him and I, we worked together at the hatchery down here one time. It was just temporary work. They didn't hire you for the year. They just hired you for part of the season when they were the busiest. And you got three and a half a day for 8 hours and 6 days a week, and sometimes you worked on a Sunday.
In what year were you working doing the timber with the timber surveyors?
That was up there in about 1919.
Why were they in there? You told me a little bit before about the history of the timber limits and why they were resurveying them at that point.
Hey, what? We went up there on a survey to verify how many limits there was, because they were all exaggerated. One place there was supposed to be, I think it was 11 limits, and we got 5. You see, and they've been paying the government for this. Oh, there was interest. I believe the Peterborough Canoe had stuff up there someplace. I don't know for sure about that, but I know Winlow had some timber up on the Duncan one time, but I guess that's all logged by now, because they pretty well cleaned it, and that's on that flood area anyway. I was on a road survey from the head of the lake to as far as Healy's Landing, and it was laid out. They cut it out. They cut the right of way out, and a fellow built a trail along there with the idea that that would be that much towards a road, a wagon road. But of course that's all underwater now. We camped at the head of the lake. We camped at the Howser's slough there at Healy's, and we below Healy's, and we camped at McGuire Landing. That was just below Idaho Landing, in the cabins that was there.
Were they trappers' cabins?
Yeah. At that time there was a little mining activity up there. I think that's why they put that road in there, or had it surveyed, and there was a mine up there, I think it was called the Omo mine.
The Omo?
Yeah, you've heard of it?
I've heard of the Omo Mule.
Well, the Omo Mule, where was this Omo Mule? Was that the one down at the mouth of the Duncan at the head of the lake?
They let it loose?
Yeah, they used to call it down a Gallop's Mule when I heard it. It lived there for years and years. Just at the head of the lake there, yeah.
Do you remember any stories about it?
No, but I don't know how the poor old beggar lived there. By gosh, on that soft ground, his feet must have needed trimming awful bad. I don't suppose anybody ever give it a handout or anything. But I suppose it just died a natural death, or a cougar killed it maybe, I don't know. Because there are a few up in there. The old Gallop, he had a cabin there. Let's call it Gallop's cabin. It was on the west side of the lake. Probably 2/3 of the way up.
Who was he?
Well, he was descendants of an old family. He used to be around Procter, as far as I know, because one of the Gallops was a lineman, and he used to patrol the line between Procter and Castle with a boat, because the line went along the shore, tacked on trees and things. Yeah, he was a nice old guy, big tall man. That's a long time ago, I guess. I can remember him though. Jack Rady, he had a claim up there on that point there. There was an assay office there on the Jubilee Point. You know that? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Did you ever go up on top there?
No.
Well, the flagpole was still standing when I saw it, and the cabin was standing. And old Harry Burns, the Burns lumberer, he was there. He was superintendent at the Gerrard Mill. He told me one time when I was working for him out there on the Slocan, and he told me that he logged off the town site of Poplar, and they railed the logs back up to Gerrard.
Huh.
And he told me one time too that at one time there must have been 50 prospectors on the Upper Duncan. And they used to bring their that was the time they had that assay office. They used to bring their samples down there.
The Wagner Group? The Wagner Group and the Bannockburn and those?
Well, the Bannockburn was up on the Duncan, and the Wagner Group was up on Healy Creek. Yeah. Old Cut Porter had that.
Do you remember him?
Yeah. I used to see him when I was a kid on the boats. I used to see him going up. He was a big man. He used to come over from Spokane. Yeah. And then Sheep Creek Gold took that thing over, and they run a road up there one time. I don't suppose you can get up very far now because it's all sloughed in. Yeah. I don't know if the bridge is there on across the river anymore.
I don't know.
No. But that's the old way into Healy's Landing. They used to go, there was a trail up there, and they went over the hill and down Hall Creek. Hall Creek come out above Healy's Landing, and they used to come down river to Healy's. Healy had horses in there.
Do you remember him?
Oh yeah, I was there one time. And Maud was just a young woman then. She came in there when she was 16 years old, right from Ireland. Yeah, that was her, old Jack was her uncle. And she had black hair, and she was as slim as a deer, and she's shy as one. If she saw you coming, she beat it for the woods. You'd never see her. But one time I went up there, we were on this survey of this road up the Duncan that time, and we were at McGuire's Landing, and the trappers had been feuding up in there, and old Dutch John and Jack Healy and them, they had had a row, and old Jack took the stove lids out of the stove there. And when we got there, there was no stove lids, but John told us where they was, and so I took a boat and I went up there and I got them. Well, I didn't see Maud that trip, but I saw Jack and he gave them, but I had to bring him back. When I brought the lids back, I saw Maud, and this was the introduction. He said, well, he says, you might as well meet Maud. He said, you might come along here sometime and you're hungry. Yeah. But that was the year that that Harry Tomlinson come in and Red Hatfield, Slim Hatfield, and that was the first time I seen them. We were on the survey. We were camping at the cache there at the mouth of Howser Creek, and they stopped there. That was the first time I seen them. But they went on up to Jack Haley's. And of course, I don't know if I should tell you these things, but Tomlinson and Maud, they made it up, and he trapped up there. She had a trap line, you know. She could put the pack on a horse. She could just skin a beaver. She used to run a trap line, skin a beaver and everything. But she was awful time getting her the heck out of there, you know. But anyway, in the old days, old Jack had come out, you know, and he'd get her out as far as Casville, but she always beat him back. She'd get back up there, and somebody would take her up the river, like old Earl Stevens or somebody like that. You didn't know them guys.
No.
Yeah. Old Earl was a fine old guy. He had a cabin at Howser Creek, right on a little ways from the cache, and he had a terrific big trap line. He had from McGuire's Landing right down to the lake and to Summit and they made them split them up, and that was when he went in partners, or Slim Hatfield come in there that year, and he went in with them. Well, by Christmas time, they had about $1,800 worth of fur, and between the two of them. And John came into town, into Nelson, to sell it. And of course, he went down to the old Klondike, and he got drunk. He sold the fur, and he got drunk, and he fell in a snowbank along on Vernon Street. That was used to be called a skid road then. And by gosh, he died. He never got back up there. But Slim wound up with Howser Creek. But of course, Slim's dead now. He died up there. But he was a drinking man. Some years he made as much as $4,000, but coming to town to shoot the works, and they had to grub stake him for all summer. Yeah. Sometimes he'd take women up there on his trap line. He always took a case of rum, and he drank all the rum before he started trapping.
They wouldn't trap for very long, would they? Only a few months?
Well, they started in about November the 1st and was good to the end of February. That was for Martin and things, but trap beaver and rats after that. Yeah, then...
they had to be careful about avalanches, though, didn't they?
Well, yeah, but that's a chance you take. Sure. And Howser Creek was a hard place to go in. There was a place there they had a cable to hang on to go along a trail through the canyon. You've been up there, I guess, have you?
I've been by, yeah.
Been on the bridge there.
No.
On the highway, the road going up there?
On the logging road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's quite a canyon there. Pretty wicked looking. Yeah. And then Thomason, when he moved down to Howser, and Maud moved down there after old Jack went to the old man's home. Maud kept house for him, and he got a job with the forestry then, and he was a forest ranger up there at one time. And he patrolled the Lardeau River on a speeder. This was when the track was in, before they had a road up from Caslow. And him and Billy Clark, that's the guy that used to make snowshoes. He used to be smoke chaser for the Kootenay Cedar people that held that timber in the valley there. And they went in parters on, and they had cut down the trap line so that they just had Rat Lake up at the head of the Howser of Duncan Lake. And Thomason and Billy Clark used to go up there every spring, and they used to get about 1,000 rats in about 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And just as soon as the ice started to break, they would put a boat on a sleigh and they'd shove it over the ice and get up there, and then they'd come back with the rats. But old Billy, he was a snowshoe maker up there. You know that. I guess you've seen lots of snowshoes that are still around.
Not many, no.
No. But one year I think he made 300 pair and sold them to Wood Valens. But that was pretty good. He got $5 a pair for them, and then with his trapping and getting this little money for smoke chasing and for taking cruisers out, looking at the timber now and again. Somebody come in and took a look at her. That's before I figured it was any good. Most people figured that this timber the hemlock wasn't much good. It was too rotten, and they had lots of excuses. But they had logged in there before a little. Cook Lumber there at Caslow had a mill in the bay there. And he logged in there, but he went broke. This was along about 1908, 9, 10, something along in there. He had a boat, a barge-type boat he was going to tow with, and they called it the Animus. It was a steam layout. But they were just logging along where you could skid the stuff into the river, you know. Of course, there was a lot of big cedar along there, you know, logs were 300-400 feet in them, lots of them, you know. Then there was old fellow named Luffman in there one time. What the heck was his first name? I forget now.
Sammy?
Huh?
Sam?
Sam. Sammy Luffman, that was it. Yeah, I met him one time. And him and old Slim didn't get along very good together, and they used to get drunk, and Sammy was living over on the Howser side, and one time Slim, he was on a drunk, and he shot the chimney off his cabin, and that kind of put old Sammy, it spooked him, and he went over across the river and camped over on the other side then. But they had some quite wingdings there.
That must have been quite a contrast to the English settlers in Howser. The trappers.
Yeah, but they didn't stay there too long. They just built a place there, and they weren't there too often. But Hinkses used to go up there. Daisy and old Maitland, they used to be up there. I was up there one time, and they were living there. And Bud Thompson had taken over the old Simpson's store, and Daisy used to come over and do the mail for him. Yeah, that was the year we went up the river that time. Old Jack Rady, he was around there at that time on the survey. He had a boat, an outboard, and he used to come up with the mail and probably a little grub for us, about once a week, something like that. He freighted us in and freighted us out. He was an old timer, and then he told me one time he had the first hotel in Gerrard. And it was only a log cabin, and he had a split cedar for a bar, and the only place he had for people to sleep, you went up a ladder into the upstairs, and it was a kind of a loft up there. I guess he had a floor on the ceiling rafters, and probably 2 or 3 guys could flop on the floor. But he had a bar there anyway. One time told me that he was with a circus down in Montana, and Soapy Smith was there, the guy that was up there in Dawson City. He was a big shot up there, and they had one of these shell games. He used to work for Soapy Smith. Oh, that was quite a while back. Yeah.
Were there many Americans in the country?
Up there? Oh, gee, I don't know. Earl Stephen was American. I think he was born in Wisconsin or Michigan, one of the two. He was part Indian, you know. Yeah, but he was a gentleman, that guy. Yeah. Oh, Mrs. Brandon was American. She was raised around Boston. Yeah, she came in there pretty early. I think she came to the B.C. about 1907. At least one time she was working in the drugstore here in town. It's called the Canada Book and Drug then. This is before she was married, of course. Yeah. You better shut that. Shut her off. I want to... It's about 50... It's about 53 or 54 years ago that I was on this log pickup. And we stayed at the hotel there in Lardeau, the old Maple Leaf. And old Ole Oliver run that. And his brother ran the hotel there at Gold Hill, the Miners Hotel there. And Emma Rear was John's daughter. She ran it right up until, I guess she died, or something like that. Anyway, the commercial hotel was right across from the station. And old Johnny McLaughlin run that. And Mrs. McLaughlin and her sister lived there. They originally were Fletchers before they were married. They were Scotch, you see. And when I go up there and they knew I was there, they would invite me for dinner. I guess they thought I was one of the clan or something. You see, my grandfather was a Scotsman. Yeah. And anyway, those days, gee, the mosquitoes were so thick, you could see them, you know. You'd see a cloud as big as this room, and you could hear them. I bet you'd be 100 feet from them, you could hear them. That sounds like hot air, but by golly, you turn around and go the other way about that time. Anyway, I remember one night the wind blew, and it blew the screen out of the room I was sleeping out of the window. And next day, the side of my head was all swelled up from mosquitoes living off of me. But the funny thing about old Ole Oliver, they talk about the Swedes and the people being roundheads and things like that. Well, he had a knob on his head just as big as a marble. We used to get quite a kick out of that, the guys that we were on this pickup. It was quite a joke to see old Ole's knob on his head, just like a marble sticking up on his head. I guess it was a cyst, you know, of some kind. Old Red McLeod was around there those days, and I knew Red pretty well. And an old fellow named of Cummins. And they were great friends, being horsemen, you know. Old Red was a packer and a stage driver and that. He'd been in the Caribou Load and up around Ashcroft and those places. And Mrs. McDonald was there. She was a widow woman. Her husband had worked on the section there. So old Red, he was a pretty gentleman old sort of a guy. And I remember coming up the only sidewalk that was there, running past Mrs. McDonald's place and up to the commercial hotel. And I guess I better start back where Red went up to Mrs. McDonald's, and he said, I'm going to have a birthday. And he said, would you cook I'd like to have some of my friends in, and would you cook a chicken dinner for me if I furnish the chickens? So she agreed, and this time I was walking up the sidewalk. Mrs. McDonald was just letting into old Red, you know, and he was apologizing and making it be as gentlemanly as he could. And what had happened, he had got her the chickens all right, but she had just discovered that he had stole the chickens out of her chicken yard and cleaned them and plucked them and everything. He gave them to the cook, and she cooked her own chickens, but he had paid her for them. She was just lighting into about that. She called him all the old scoundrels and everything. No, Mrs. McDonald says, no, I'm not so bad as all that. And he apologized and everything. And it was funny as the dickens to listen to. On this log pickup across from Lardeau, there was a couple over there. I think what their name was.
Bulmers?
Yeah. What is
Bulmer.
it? Yeah. Well, we come along there with a great big cedar log on the laying on the beach. And this fella come out, and he begged us not to take this log. And it had been there for 40 years, I'll bet. And the sand was piled halfway up. He was going to make shakes out of this. I thought that was pretty funny.
Did you take it?
No, we didn't take it. You'd had to have a steam shovel to get the gravel away from it to roll it down under the water. Anyway, we put in, I think it was 20 some odd days on this pickup. Another guy and I, we had a rowboat and cant hooks and peavies and pike poles and ropes and stuff. We had the old Eleanor, an old Jean Montre. He was an old timer on the river, on the lake. He come in here, and I think it was in 92 or 94. And it was before the Great Northern got in. He'd walked in from Montana. And he had the Eleanor, the little steam tug, and he would coast along the shore close in, and we'd shove the logs off as we come to them, you know, and he'd sweep them up in a little boom. And then we'd take them up to Lardeau and put them in where the sawmill was. A fellow named Severance had that sawmill. He went broke there, though. Yeah. And I remember when we got through, we had to catch the boat at 5:30 down at Caslow to come to Nelson. So we got up in the morning, and he steamed us down there, and we put our stuff onto the Kuskanook, and just as he was backing off, he said, how much time have I got? I said, gee, Gene, I don't know. Well, he says, you're the hell of the timekeeper, he said. Well, then he pulled out. He seemed to be a little huffy. So I met him in town. And he come and told me, he says, you gave me a half a day more than I thought I had coming. And I think I gave him a day for taking us down, because we'd had to hire another boat. Yeah. But anyway, I used to laugh, but Gene was a pretty good guy. And he tried to go up the river one time there, but he couldn't make it. The water was milky, you see, and you couldn't tell when you was in shallow water, and you couldn't stand on the bow and take soundings all the time, and he got cold feet and he turned around and went out of there. But he wouldn't let you on the boat with cork shoes on. You had to take off your cork shoes before you could get on the boat. But he was a good old guy. Clever, god darn for a guy that couldn't read or write. Yeah. And another funny thing about it, he'd get a hold of a newspaper. I've been with him quite a lot. And he'd get a newspaper, and he'd see a picture of something he got curious about, he'd get you to read what was under it. And you'd read it. Oh, maybe after he thought it all over, he'd hand you get there to read it. He thought maybe you were just spoofing him, you know. And you read it over again. You had to be careful you didn't mispronounce something or something like that. But I knew what it was, you know. One time I stowed, in the course of a summer, we towed 1,000,000 feet from up here at Kootenay Creek of white pine down here with a little tugboat. We could handle about 100,000 in the river.
Do you remember some farm equipment that was brought in from the prairies that was going to be used in the woods that ended up being used for a sawmill at Howser and sat there on the flats below Howser? Old farm equipment?
No, the only thing I saw was a steam tractor they had. It looked like a small threshing machine. They used to use it with a trailer at Marblehead when Wilson was doing a little work around there, and they had built a road up Meadow Creek to where they call the Blue Marble. That was the only time there was half a dozen guys working up there, and they got this road up there, and they set up their stone cutting machine, you know, to drill a row of holes. But I imagine the marble was too soft, or there was probably too much quartz in it or something. They never did do anything with it. But I remember when they used to barge marble down from Marblehead the time they built the courthouse here in Nelson. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they got it all from there. Across from Castle, there's a couple of little quarries, you know. Have you ever seen those?
No, Campbell Creek and around?
No, they were south of Campbell Creek on that bluff along there. I've been to them when I was a kid. When I was on the boat, we laid over at Castle, you see. And old John Cameron, he was the chief engineer, and he had a boat, and he used to let us take that sometime, go fishing. But they used to barge that down to here and haul it up with horses, and I can remember them cutting that stone around the corner of Vernon Street and onto Ward Street, on the west side of Ward Street. You see, when they built that. Huh. I don't know if they got the marble for the post office, which is a city hall there or not, but I presume they did. Yeah. Because that was built a little earlier, I think in 1902 or something like that. See, the other one built in 1908. I remember when it was running at Marblehead, they had a lot of machinery there, but I think a fellow named Wilson was there, and there was a sawmill across the river there. It was started to build and never finished. Mm-hmm. Did you ever see that?
There's a small home there now with a sawmill. Across from Marblehead?
Yeah. And they built a road around there and connected up with that road that went in there above the old red bridge there, on the road that went along the east side and come in just at the foot of the lake and went up to Howser. There was a road there one time. But this fellow that built that, I don't know, he was so slow that some of the mud sills were rotted out before he got the roof on it or something. And some of that machinery, some of the big pulleys, the trees had grown up between the spokes in the wheels and that. But he had a piano, this guy did, and he was a wonderful musician. I can't think of his name now, but probably Ernie can tell you. He would know who he was. He was quite a musician, this guy, on a piano. He had a piano there. He played that more than he did, I guess, working on this sawmill. But I don't know where he comes. Seems to me he came, this fella come from Indiana or someplace back that way. I couldn't say, really. But there was a sawmill there at Cooper Creek one time. A fellow named Acom had that. I worked there when I was telling you I worked there one time. But funny thing about it, I got canned there. I was lucky I got canned. I was the last guy that got paid. The other fellows had to stay there and load out the lumber before they could get their money. I was pretty lucky. But anyway, I come into town then, and I was walking down the street, and Elmo Horton stopped me. I didn't know him, but he stopped me, and he said, "You want to go to work?" He said, "Scaling," he said. Well, I had a couple of dollars then, and I was single, and I was just rooting around and didn't know where I was going, and so I didn't take the job. I don't know where I went, but I went someplace. But about a year or so after, I hit him up for a job, and I worked for him 7 seasons. He was a dandy guy to work for. I had a boom down there where the airport is. That was all low ground, and flooded, and the water come up those days to around 15, 16, 18 feet, you know. So that it'd stay up long enough to cut maybe a couple of million feet of matchstock, you see. So that wasn't a bad job. I used to unload the rail in a bunch, you know, in the winter, and some would come down the river, and they'd buy it wherever they could. That was a pretty good job. You got $5 a day in those days. That was pretty big money. You see, a fella counter hopping here or ribbon wrestling in town, he'd get maybe $60 a month. On a survey, it depended on what you were doing. You'd get $4 or $5, depending. But you got your board thrown in, and you got your traveling expenses, and you got paid going to and from the job. And on a rainy day, you got your board, so you didn't go in the hole. Everything you had was clear. But it was hard. You slept on the ground on bulb beds, and you cooked in an open fire if you had a cook, and if you didn't have a cook, you had to do it yourself. And that's the way it wound up at the tail end when the surveying got a little, so it wasn't such some muddy jobs. The crews were smaller, and you sometimes had to do your own cooking. If you couldn't pick up a cook that would go on these jobs, you had to do it yourself, which didn't help the cooking any. But you got so you could manage, you know. You'd have hot cakes in the morning, bacon and eggs, and you run home there all the way home, and you peel the potatoes and started a mulligan going or something like that. But those put in long days, but a day was a day. If it was 8 hours or 12 hours, that was a day. You didn't get no overtime.
Was this all the time working for the H. Green Company? Were you all the time working for the H. Green Company?
Oh, no, I worked for all kinds of guys. I worked on the survey of that road between Gerrard and Trout Lake for Shaler.
That was later on.
Oh, yeah, that was later on. I was only about 25 when they pulled up the steel, you know. I worked on a survey up in the Bonanza Basin, up above Gerrard on that ridge between Trout Lake and the Duncan, or Healy Creek rather.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I worked up in there one time. We were pretty near 8,000 feet.
Near the Silver Cup? South of the Silver Cup?
I don't know. I can't remember the names of these things, but it was awful rough country. There were some places you had to triangulate. You couldn't cover the ground. That is, you couldn't run the line out. You had to triangulate. It was in the Bonanza Basin. It was up around, I think it's called the American Boy up in there. I don't know for sure if that was it, but remember there was one mine in another basin there where there was cabins and everything. It was up, we stayed in the plate cabin. I think that belonged to old Jack Persian that had the hotel there by the wharf.
In
Gerrard. He was an old timer. So was she. They had a daughter. She was she'd been a school teacher. He was a school teacher, and she took up music. And I was there one time, and I don't know what we were doing there, but then we was eating over there at Jack Person's, and she was playing the piano there. But she was up from the States, but she went down into the States, and she gradually disappeared. Apparently, nobody knew where she went to. She was a very pretty girl, but that was her only daughter. Old Alec McLean, he lived there. He was an old timer around Trout Lake and around Ferguson, and he lived there in Gerrard, and his wife was sort of, they lived in the old station there, and they had a boy, Neil, that just died about a year ago. He lived up here at Will Point.
6 Mile, right?
Yeah. He was just a kid then, though. But old Alec, he wasn't doing anything. I don't know how he made out, but when we were there at the hatchery, he used to come over there, and there was some fellows come in from trail that had some high-powered liquor, and by God, he liked to drink. And they gave him a drink, I can remember, and by golly, he says, you know, this must be some of that overproof liquor anyway. So, well, have another one, Alec. And gee, he blinked his eyes and the tears run down, but he drank her. And he just made her home. He never showed up for about 2 days that time. Then there was an old guy there. What was his name? Gosh, I can't think of his name. Anyway, somebody's talking about him if you can't think of their names. When we were on this survey around the lake on that road, there was a couple of guys come down from Revelstoke, and they went up Healy quick. There was a asbestos lead up there, but it was pretty low grade, you know. But these were pretty old guys. And they went up there and they come back, and gee, they were pretty tired. And the station was abandoned then, you see, and we were sleeping in that, and we had a cookhouse in there, and Mrs. Brandon gave him a cup of tea, and that kind of gave him enough power to go over there, and there was